Krystal, what are you taking a look at?
In a single day, 2 instances of absolutely cartoonish corruption were revealed among some of America's most powerful elites. Senator Bob Menendez, chair of the powerful Foreign Relations Committee, was indicted again. Once again, the senator stands accused of accepting cash, gold bars, house payments, a luxury vehicle, and other gifts in exchange for doing favors for Egyptian businessmen and the Egyptian government. And at the same time, ProPublica dropped their latest investigation into the brazen corruption of Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas, who has arguably become the most ideologically influential justice on this conservative court. In this latest piece, they detail how Thomas was groomed by conservative billionaires over years, attending ultra-elite Bohemian Grove retreats. These ties not only result in all of his luxury trips and private school tuition and payments for his mother's home from billionaire Harlan Crow, but also led to a relationship with the most influential big money network in the entire country, the Koch network. Justice Thomas went on to flagrantly disregard any conflict of interest concerns by raising money for the Kochs, in spite of the fact that they routinely have cases in front of the court. Of course, none of this objectively corrupt behavior was disclosed to the public in what appears to be a clear violation of federal ethics laws. Now, these stories may seem kind of unrelated, different parties, details, ideologies, but they hold in common quite a lot, as it turns out. From their grotesque betrayal of public trust to the code of silence and complicity among elites that enables such absolutely outlandish behavior. Both stories of corruption stand out for their direct impact on policymaking at the very highest levels. As chair of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, Senator Menendez's influence on our nation's foreign policy was second only to the president himself. And all the while, he has apparently been available for what, in the grand scheme of foreign governments, was a cheap price. Egyptian businessmen were allegedly able to buy this guy for a few $100,000, a bargain considering the power that he wields and the favors he was able to allegedly provide. The impact of Clarence Thomas's corrupt dealings with the Kochs and other libertarian billionaires is, if anything, even more far-reaching. The Kochs look set to win one of their longtime goals in this upcoming Supreme Court term, stripping federal agencies of much of their power to regulate anything from clear air and water to labor rights to consumer protections. This issue, the so-called Chevron deference, is a libertarian billionaire obsession. And lo and behold, as Thomas has been feted and lavished with gifts by the very businessmen most influential in pushing the end of Chevron, his position on this issue has totally flipped. Thomas once authored a major defense of Chevron and the ability of federal agencies to regulate in areas where congressional intent is ambiguous, but his billionaire buddies appear to have successfully changed his mind. Thomas has since repudiated his previous position and looks set to help end Chevron, granting his billionaire benefactors their fondest wish and kneecapping the ability of the federal government to protect the rights of ordinary Americans. But it's not just their powerful impact on our democracy that unites these 2 instances of corruption at the very highest level. Both stem from the very same rotten roots. In fact, no institution has done more to legalize and normalize corruption than the Supreme Court. David Sirota of Lever News has been making this point very powerfully. He writes, if proven true, the sordid details of the indictment of Senator Menendez reflect a country whose billionaire-owned Supreme Court has been explicitly telling politicians that flagrant, grotesque corruption will now be considered perfectly legal. In 2016, justices unanimously overturned the corruption conviction of former Virginia Governor McDonnell, essentially saying gifts may be exchanged for certain government favors. Menendez weaponized that to fight a past indictment and will likely try to do so again. SCOTUS justices now have a personal motive to try to protect Menendez from prosecutors. Justice's own acceptance of gifts from those with businesses before the court mimics the alleged scheme detailed in the Menendez indictment. Supreme Court justices will likely be personally averse to criminalizing the same behavior we now know that they themselves routinely engage in. Now, this is just the most explicit, codified way in which elites enable corruption. Just behold the silence, though, from most corners surrounding these new stunning developments. In response to Menendez once again facing indictment for insane levels of corruption, as of this writing, one of his Senate Democratic colleagues has called for his resignation. Just one. Kudos to John Fetterman for doing that. And this code of silence and protection comes all the way from the top. Majority Leader Schumer not only declined to call for Menendez to step down, but took this opportunity to praise him as a dedicated public servant who is, quote, always fighting hard for the people of New Jersey. Of course, according to the indictment, he was in reality fighting hard for some shady Egyptian businessmen, not so much for the people of New Jersey. Meanwhile, Chief Justice John Roberts, who supposedly cares so deeply about the institution of the court, has done nothing but stonewall any attempts at real reform. Remember, the Supreme Court alone, among federal courts, has no code of ethics, allowing justices to engage in whatever twisted, brazen levels of corruption that they can justify to themselves, because they don't have to justify it to us. None of Thomas's fellow justices have spoken a single critical word against his enrichment by a powerful network of billionaires and conservative activists. And the reason why is pretty simple. Because so many elite politicians are guilty of some level of corruption, even if not as cartoonish as Menendez or Thomas, there's a sort of principle of mutually assured destruction that ends up reigning supreme. They all keep their mouths shut and the status quo locked in because their own hands are not clean. That's why stock trading remains. That's why anti-corruption laws are loosened. And even when politicians and their aides are indicted, they frequently get let off. These men believe the rules do not apply to them, and unfortunately, too often, they are correct. And that is what enables it, because you ask yourself—
Hey guys, if you want to see what I had to say to Krystal's monologue, not just this one, all of them, going back to the very beginning, become a premium subscriber today, breakingpoints.com.